So that's us started. Lovely. So you're going to get an introduction from me first. I want to welcome you to the second collaboration of Library Staff Love Learning and the FOSIL Group. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Elizabeth Hutchinson, and I'm an independent trainer and advisor for school libraries. I left work in 2019 after being working for the Schools Library Service in Guernsey for 15 years to go independent. And obviously a great time to go independent when you suddenly find yourself in the middle of a pandemic. But bizarrely, it's led us to moving things online in such a way that I could never have imagined would have happened without coronavirus. So in some way, I'm quite grateful for that. So Library Staff Love Learning started about 3 years ago when I decided that I needed something to push me to do more professional development. And I put up recommended reading once a month and posed some questions. Daryl and I, who I'll introduce you to in a minute, decided that we could do something just a little bit different. At the end of last year, we did our first collaboration between Library Staff Love Learning and the FOSIL Group, which led to a webinar at the end of it with the authors of the publication that we were looking at. So when he told me that Barbara Stripling was willing to engage with us and support it again, I jumped at the chance, you can imagine. I'm absolutely delighted to be meeting Barbara for the first time today. And Daryl will introduce her more fully to you. My job is to introduce you to Daryl. So I have known Daryl since, what is it now, 2011 that we met. And I found out the other day that he became a school librarian at the same time that I actually qualified. So our paths to school librarianship and school libraries have been on this trajectory since about 2003, which is when I qualified. So he is the founder of FOSIL and the FOSIL Group, creator of FOSIL and the FOSIL Group. And I am delighted to call him a colleague, but also a friend. And he is somebody that has pushed me to thinking more deeply and understanding more fully the impact that school libraries and librarians can have within education. And without him, I don't think any of us would be sat here today, but certainly I wouldn't be on the path that I'm currently on without his help and support. So without further ado, I would love to introduce you to Daryl and let him tell you about Barbara. Thank you.
Yeah, so it's really good to see some people whose names I recognize and some people whose names I don't recognize. So it's really exciting opportunity to be talking about stuff that some of us have been wrestling with for a long time, but to be doing that with people who maybe we've only just met for the first time now. So I am currently head of library at Oakham School, and Jenny is curriculum librarian for upper school at Oakham School, although there is quite a big change afoot, which I hope to be able to share fairly soon. So very exciting change. So the reason why I mentioned that is just so that from some of the stuff that I say, it's clear that I am at an independent school, so an independent secondary day and boarding school that offers A-level and IB diploma program in England. But when I first stumbled into school librarianship from teaching in 2003, I also stumbled across Jesse Shearer's seminal work, The Foundations of Education for Librarianship, which was published in 1972. So that may sound strange. A seminal work published in 1972 about largely university level librarianship in America, having a profound influence and a formative influence on me as a school librarian with no experience, knowledge and experience of school libraries. But that in itself is part of the story. And so Jesse Shearer's work was the first attempt to systematically view the librarian's professional education and to explore their role in society's total communication system. So absolutely extraordinary work. But in that work, he observed that increasingly research as a method of instruction and an environment for formalized learning is being introduced into undergraduate as well as graduate programs. This undergraduate research, or more properly inquiry, has its own characteristic information needs, though academic librarians generally have given these requirements slight attention, while the faculty has tended to ignore them almost entirely. So the thing that really struck me was that since then, inquiry as a method of instruction and an environment for formalized learning has increasingly been introduced into school library programs. So it's not just from graduate to undergraduate, but from undergraduate into schools. And the International Baccalaureate is an obvious example, but it's not the only one. And the IFLA School Library Guidelines, as another example, frame learning through inquiry, which is a core instructional activity within the school library's pedagogical program. Then equally formative was Curriculum Connections Through the Library, which was edited by Barbara Stripling and Sandra Hughes Hassel, and published in the same year that I first came under Jesse Shearer's influence. And I pulled that book off the shelf today, and I still have 2 chapters bookmarked in that book from 2003. The first one is Inquiry-Based Learning, the chapter Inquiry-Based Learning by Barbara Stripling. And the second one is Librarians Morph into Curriculum Developer by Charlotte Vlassis. Now, little could I have known then that these 2 concerns, inquiry-based learning and the librarian's central role in curriculum mapping and curriculum development, would combine into FOSIL in 2011 and eventually lead to the formation of the FOSIL Group in 2019, which brings us to today. Now, while I have the deepest respect and admiration for what Barbara has done, Barbara herself would be the first to point out that what has been done only matters insofar as it lays a solid foundation what still needs to be done. And not just by her, but by all of us who have resolutely adopted inquiry as a stance of wonder and puzzlement that gives rise to a dynamic process of coming to know and understand the world, and a process that is truly empowering to our children and therefore transformational both inwardly and outwardly. Now, in this spirit, Barbara has made all of her work freely available under Creative Commons. And quite simply, without that, FOSIL and the FOSIL Group simply would not exist. And it's in that same spirit of sharing freely what we have received freely that we meet today, to find our part in this important and I think increasingly urgent work that is beyond us as individuals on our own. So just before I hand over to Barbara, this discussion today really is framed by these 2 paradigm shifts that we've been discussing in the forum. The first paradigm shift requires of us a deeper understanding of the characteristic information needs of inquiry as both a method of instruction and an environment for formalized learning. And the second paradigm shift, which is actually the focus of Barbara's chapter, is a deeper understanding of what happens to these characteristic information needs in a digital environment. So with thanks and apologies to Jules Scott Heron, the revolution will not be televised. So the revolution that truly matters the one that I think is going to make a decisive difference in the lives of our children, will not attract the attention I think that it deserves. But that is both, I think, a challenge and an encouragement. A challenge to us and an encouragement. And with that, really, I'd like to hand over to Barbara, just really to, introduce this discussion and maybe just give us something to think about going ahead. So, an absolute pleasure to spend this afternoon with you. Thank you.
Well, thank you. And it's so nice to meet all of you all. I hope some of you will turn on your cameras when we open it up, and that it really is a conversation. What I want everyone to understand is that the essence of inquiry is the inquirer, that it really matters who it is that is doing the inquiry, and that I'm an inquirer and I am learning all the time. One of the reasons that I wrote this chapter on a book chapter, and I've written articles on inquiry in the digital environment, was that I didn't understand it. I didn't understand what was going to happen to things I thought I knew about how to nurture inquiry for all of my students, but I knew it had to change. I knew that the technology itself would put pressures on what we were seeking and how we were looking at it, and our perspective on it, and our ability to sort through everything and make sense of it, connect it to the real world. So what you are seeing right before you is somebody who's in a mid stage of learning. I loved our conversation on the forum, because every time one of you all posted something, I went, oh, we need to think about that. Oh, yes, that's also relevant. And so I don't think today is going to be about answers. I think it's going to be a lot about questions and where we all are, recognizing that every one of us is on a journey. And it's a journey that is based on where each of us is at this particular point. Maybe the whole idea of inquiry is new, and I can remember well when it was new to me, and I'm still defining it. Part of what Daryl has helped me realize is that inquiry is way beyond a process. It's a stance. It's a stance on the world. And that's so much more important than just following a process. It is a way of living. And when you take that understanding and then see what are the implications of that then for what I need to teach, what I need to continue to learn, that's what makes it really exciting. So I'll tell you a couple of, I've written in the forum some of the areas that I'm thinking about, but I'm hoping that this today will be all of the areas that you're thinking about and what you're being challenged in, and where you are at the point in your understanding, and questions that we all have, and have it just be a conversation. The two things that I have probed most deeply recently on, and it's because I don't really understand it well enough, is social emotional learning during inquiry, because I know that social emotional learning helps academic learning. I know it's integral to inquiry. And I also know that particularly at the secondary level, nobody is teaching social emotional learning. We're just saying, do academics and don't worry about the inner life of kids or of teachers even. The second area that I'm really thinking a lot about is deep reading. and its importance at all phases of inquiry, how it actually enables inquiry. It is inquiry, but it's a literacy skill that I think when we really understand the deep reading skills of inquiry, I think we're going to understand the power of collaboration with content area teachers. And deep reading just naturally transfers to every content area. Whether it's a whole inquiry project, doesn't have to be. It can just be reading a text for science class. But it is an inquiry stance that you get through deep reading, a questioning stance. And so I think it makes it much more possible to integrate inquiry throughout a school, throughout all content areas, and also to have implications for the way that all of us interact with the information world writ large, so that our students leave our schools prepared to be active and participatory citizens. They have learned how to learn, how to inquire, how to read deeply, how to challenge and question what they see. And if you all have read anything about the United States recently, you know how important it is that we develop citizens who are more thoughtful than what we've seen in some occasions here in the US. So I would like to open up to all of you all and tell me, what questions are you facing? What intrigues you the most? Where do you want to push next? You can't do it all at once. So what might be something that you want to focus on or understand better? And it doesn't have to apply just to inquiry in the digital environment, but I know that is posing some real intriguing questions, especially as we have lived through the past year of online learning. So I throw it open.
So if anybody wants to ask a question, do you want to just put your hand up, and then we can I'll invite people to come in. But I maybe will start it off, if that's all right, Barbara. Currently, I was asked, so I run training sessions, and currently I was asked to run a reading for learning session. And my first reaction, if I'm honest, was, I can't do that. I don't know how to do that. And after a very interesting conversation with Daryl, we did work out, which has subsequently been discussed in the forum, the different stages of FOSIL and how we are engaging our students with reading. My question, I suppose, is based on librarians' understanding of how they can support. I think we're very good at understanding that we teach information literacy, that we teach skills, but actually, how do we branch out to being that person that through inquiry we are actually teaching how to deeply read in a more substantial way? Because that's quite a big lesson, isn't it? It's like that next step. It's not just a tick skills box, is it? It's an emotional and social journey. So I suppose it's a question about how do we engage with school librarians who are frightened to take that next step. How can we encourage them, I suppose, to know and understand that they have more to offer? Big question, I think.
I don't know if we want me to answer. Would anyone else like to? Let's hear from somebody else, and then I'll give my take on it as well.
Elizabeth, are you happy for me to chip in?
Absolutely, please do, yeah.
Hi, I'm Ruth. Just introduce myself. Hi, Daryl. I'm the librarian at Tunbridge Grammar School in Kent. We are a selective grammar school. We run the IB programme through UK years 7, 8 and 9. UK GCSEs and then the diploma program at IB. So I'm mostly approaching this from an IB point of view. The other evening, I was on a very, very different forum with a group of librarians looking at Canva, which is a piece of design software, and how they could best use that to write their school newsletters and produce book trailers. And it occurred to me, as it often does when I'm reading this FOSIL digital literacy kind of material, that I feel almost schizophrenic. I feel as though there are a group of librarians who are how I viewed school librarians before I got into school librarianship, without meaning to be pejorative or dismissive at all of those people or of that world. And then there are this kind of group that we're involved in today, which I feel is almost like an academic study of librarianship. This is what I hoped I would learn about librarianship when I went to library school. And I don't know about anybody else, but I didn't learn this when I went to library school. And I've had to work harder to get my thoughts in order about this seminar today than I have had to work academically for a significant amount of time. And I think that that is something that really could be considered and needs to be considered, exactly as you're asking, Elizabeth. How do we reach those people? I mean, they're scared to put their hands up, you know, and be counted generally, I would suggest. Not all of them, but, you know, I think that librarians don't have a forthright reputation. They have a rather stand backish reputation, and this doesn't need that. This requires you to be prepared to stand up and speak and be counted. And I think that's something we need to consider how we can overcome.
Yeah, I would agree. I think it's really interesting that I think it's probably due to the fact that we've gone down the route in the UK of unqualified librarians. And actually, like you said, with the understanding prior to working in the school library of what school librarians did is in all of us. And actually that's a very a true word I would suggest about teachers too, and therefore head teachers. Their understanding of what they can get to and from a school library and librarian is not very high in the first instance. And having now got two sons who are both teachers, I've watched them go through primary, secondary, university, and then teacher training without any mention of school libraries. And the only reason they know about school libraries is because of me. So that in itself needs to change. Schools themselves need to understand what they could get. And you know, maybe it's starting from the teacher training college rather than the little librarian sat in the library who wanted a part-time job is doing the best they can. You know, that it's a dilemma, a real dilemma. And I don't know whether we've got the answer to it, apart from offering something that is genuinely an answer to everybody's questions. So by having the IFLA School Library Guidelines, which categorically states exactly what it is that school librarians could be doing, and a tool such as FOSIL to be able to do it, we're now in a position to be going, you know, we haven't got all the answers, but actually we have a foundation, and the foundation is there, and that's how we then move forward with this.
May I add something?
Yeah, of course, please do.
I found, my name is Magda. I am a librarian in an independent secondary school. I found that unless I literally go and grab a teacher and say, I could do this and that, and they literally make big eyes, oh, I didn't know you can do it. Unless I do it and explain, I can help with research and inquiry, and we can make projects that last a term or whatever you want. They are not aware. And this links to what you were saying, that teachers and senior leadership need to be aware what librarians can do. And it would be much more beneficial if the librarianship education, higher education, had at the core something like that, that trains librarians to be once more assertive and more confident to go and offer when nobody asks, and teach them inquiry process, because it is fascinating and I believe everybody should be able to do this.
Yeah, I would agree. it's that. Go on then. Yes, Jenny, go on.
Because I think what Magda's saying there is really important, that it is actually all about relationship, and a lot of what we do comes out of relationship that we build with individual teachers, but also with departments, by going to things like teach meets, by taking opportunities to deliver inset and things like that. But in building that kind of relationship with teachers, those teachers then go on into other schools. Some of them will go on to become deputy heads and heads in other schools. They'll go on to become heads of departments in other schools. And they take an expectation of the librarians with them. So by building what we do and building up the reputation of librarians in our own schools, that actually spreads out into other schools and gives a mandate to librarians in other schools. And if we have forums like the one we have on the FOSIL Group, or like the stuff that you're doing on the Library Staff Love Learning, if we have forums for librarians to talk to each other and to spread good practice and to share resources, because we don't have time to do all of this stuff all by ourselves. But if we share stuff, we get stronger. And the more we do that, the more this will spread. And actually, at some point, surely this has got to attract the attention of library schools and start to attract the attention of the people who are running training and saying, actually, maybe we should be incorporating this into our courses. Maybe we should be training new librarians to do this. And revolutions start with relationships. They start small, but they have to start somewhere.
Charles, yeah, jump in.
Hello, everybody. I'm Charlie Inskip, and I teach in a library school at UCL. We have in our information literacy optional module, we had 20 students this year. And we've been teaching information literacy as an elective or an option for the last 4 or 5 years now. And one of the things that we try to help our students with is how to do networking with teachers, because we recognize the stuff you're talking about and we hear about it from the other side as well. So we're very keen to support our students in developing their networking skills, as well as their understanding of pedagogy and how to embed themselves within the curriculum, which I do think is a very important underpinning of any tensions that arise between librarians and teachers, because schools in this country are so much focused on the delivery of the curriculum and the testing of the student that it's very hard to reach away from that. And the IB and the EPQ has been a fantastic gift for librarians, we feel, and for the school librarians that we have in our classes have really have been very excited about the benefits of EPQ in terms of raising the profile of the library staff within the school. I think you made a really interesting point there about getting teachers aware too, and I think that that's a really important step. And CILIP's information literacy group, their journal, the Journal of Information Literacy, and their annual conference, Lilac, all great opportunities for librarians to talk to one another about information literacy. But without teachers coming on board, then there's definitely a trick missing. So this, I'm really glad that I signed up to come to a Sunday afternoon workshop to hear what you've all got to say, because we teach our students about how to do teaching. We don't give them a teaching qualification, we give them a library qualification. Well, they earn it but we do teach them something about what pedagogy means and how to put together a class. And then for their assessment, they have to teach a class as part of that assessment and design a class and also write a policy for their institution. So we're giving them quite practical skills, but embedding those within the research. And Marie Lloyd is on our staff. We've got a lot of emphasis in our research group about information literacy, me and Alison Hicks and Marie. And we're working with Sheffield on various aspects of that with Sheila Webber and Pam Kinnan and other people as well. So there is a lot of interest in library schools in the subjects you're talking about. I think part of the problem is to do with the school libraries becoming fewer, and we don't get many librarians from state comprehensive education coming to work with us, but we do have a lot of private school librarians, and that's really our main focus. I'll stop dribbling on now. I saw Darryl.
Darryl, do you want to join in?
Well, I was very, very pleased when I saw Charlie sign up, because I think one of the questions that certainly I've had for a long time is, so this is not to say that countries like America or Australia or Canada or New Zealand have solved the problem. But I think the thing that I find really interesting is that at a postgraduate level, it would be possible to specialize for 2 years in school librarianship at a library school. So there are probably more universities in, say, for example, the States that offer a specialization, a 2-year specialization in school librarianship than there are universities in this country. And one of the things that struck me through my involvement with IFLA is I reviewed a book on school librarianship education and training. And one of the things that struck me, which I think touches on 2 aspects of what we've been speaking about now, is that the 2-year master's in France is a master's on the one hand in teaching, so it's half teaching and half librarianship, and that they do 101 hours, I think it was 101 hours as part of that master's on information literacy, but that is within a broader understanding of themselves as specialist teachers, which I think is the case in America, in New Zealand, in Australia, and in Canada, for example. So how from, say, from Charlie, from your perspective, how do we go from an elective in information literacy to information literacy being part of an inquiry-based approach to teaching and learning that includes standalone projects like the EE and the EPQ, but in order to be transformational, actually needs to take place in the day-to-day teaching of all subjects?
It's easy.
Because it seems like that is the...
There's a really easy answer, but it's a very, very difficult thing to do, and that is get information literacy into the curriculum.
Yeah.
If you get information literacy into the curriculum, then teachers will start to understand what it is. They will start to deliver it with the cooperation of and support of their librarians, and the kids will need to learn it because that's what it, because it's in the curriculum. And that's why I mentioned that earlier. The curriculum focus of education in this country is so much that without that recognition, maybe call it digital skills, that's a bit easier for some people to swallow, but put the same kind of thing into the curriculum and then you've got it made, really.
You see, interestingly, Charlie, I would have agreed with you about 5 years ago. I would have said, without question, I needed an information literacy framework that I was going to put in at policy level here in Guernsey. I left before I ever managed to achieve that, because they just did not understand what information literacy was. And since then, having come to understand inquiry through FOSIL, and understanding that we can still teach our information literacy, but we need the wider, broader skills. I've had more conversations with teachers who now understand exactly what it is that I do than ever before when I was talking about information literacy. And actually, us being part of a much bigger picture is a far greater tool than information literacy will ever be, in my opinion, because I think we sit ourselves in a bubble that nobody else understands apart from school librarians or librarians. And that's the hurdle. And I think we found it through FOSIL, through inquiry. And actually, when you start talking to teachers about inquiry, they then get and understand what it is that you can do and you can bring to the school. And actually, without being difficult, I think teaching school librarians to promote information literacy is a really difficult one, that you're sending them out into schools with something that is very difficult currently to talk about.
It depends what you mean by information literacy.
Absolutely, that's true.
And if you mean by information literacy using the library catalogue, then you know, that's very different from what I have in mind there, which I'm thinking about learning how to learn. You know, the wider information landscapes, which are very contextual and to do with inquiry, and that's how we support our students. Is we don't teach them how to be school librarians or law librarians or any kind of librarians. We teach them how to be librarians, and they can identify their specialisms through their reading, through their coursework assessments, through a dissertation. We give them lots of opportunities to do inquiry to help them to investigate and research and explore their particular sector of interest. And we find that it's really, you know, that really seems to work, and our students really engage at a very high level. And sadly, they all say at the end, I wish I'd known how interesting it was going to be when I started. I wish they had too, but we get a lot of, you know, really good engagement. But I think you're right. How, if you think of information literacy in a certain way, and in that sort of competence-based tick box, the way that it used to be thought of at librarianship level, I think that the changes in the new CILIP definition and the ACRL framework have been really important in demonstrating a shift in thinking towards teaching and learning rather than searching. Barbara.
I'm finding this very fascinating. You all have to understand that the US is exactly where you are. We have the same questions, and I was a library educator, Charlie, for 7 years, and you know, I worked so hard at it, and then my students would go out into environments where the thing was they had to do story hours, and it was just difficult for them to be assertive, like you were saying, Ruth, just to find their place and make it known. And it was interesting to me, Daryl, that you brought up that chapter by Charlotte Vlassis, who was a librarian that I worked with in apparently while I was editing that book, and the process that we used in Chattanooga for that project. She was a librarian at a school, and we used a curriculum mapping process. And the reason I'm bringing it up now is that we're talking about embedding into the curriculum. But what I find in the US is that content area teachers focus on content, and they really don't focus on the skills that make it possible for kids to get a deep understanding of the content, nor are the classroom teachers really prepared to teach those skills. that's our expertise. As Jenny says, this is our area of specialty. And so what we did in that curriculum mapping project was that the teachers mapped their content in all different subject areas, and we mapped it by month so we could see how it all fit together. But then we as librarians mapped the most essential skills for that particular content. So we knew if we wanted to teach multiple perspectives, we knew what course and at what point in the year that we could collaborate and introduce that teaching of that skill into the content. And it became a very seamless way for us to embed the skills that we wanted to teach. And the teachers were very receptive because we had worked on this map together, and they recognized, oh, okay, we're going to bring this in, and it opened up a lot of doors for us. So I don't know if any of you all have done curriculum mapping, but I would agree with everything you're saying about how important it is to develop relationships, to embed in the curriculum, to form partnerships, and actually teach the skills. But part of our issue is getting a structure that gives us a way in. So it's not every person yelling at every teacher, please partner with me. That's obviously not going to work.
Ruth, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, so just a couple of things. It seems to me that there are two possibilities that we're talking about. We're talking about a kind of shift at a policy level, and I don't know whether I'm afraid I've failed to remember whether anybody else here has been involved with a project with a woman called Stephanie Goldstein from Informal. Daryl's nodding vaguely, which is a
Stefan. It's a man. It's Stefan.
Yeah.
It's a policy project, isn't it? It's to get this kind of information into in at a governmental, they're talking about, level, or some kind of wider level. It seems to have faltered slightly at the moment in that I haven't heard from them since before Christmas. I think everybody got a bit tired of the whole thing. But so there's that kind of thing going on, and I think that's at the library school, curriculum level. And then Jenny said in the forum, and she said again today, about this kind of idea that just doing this work is the way to get it done. And that's, I think, Barbara, what you're saying is that if we can just begin to do this work in our schools and educate our teachers that we can do it and that it can be done and that it's an interesting and engaging thing for the students and for us and for them, then we can drip, drip, drip that slowly down. And it seems to me that both of those things have to be done at the same time. But your comment, Barbara, about teaching library students who then go away and find they have to do story time rings horribly true with me. I don't have to do story time in a secondary school, fortunately, but I do have to shelve the books and catalogue the books and deliver the books at the moment because the library isn't open. And, the time I actually have to curriculum map, I would give up everything else I could do if I could sit down with the teachers and curriculum map and think, oh, that would be interesting. Look what I could teach there, and look how that could develop you through year 8 and through year 9. There's me, and I work 5 hours a day, and I appreciate all the effort that that FOSIL allows me to draw on in order to do that. But there is another practical barrier to it, because I know that I'm not alone. If I talk to my local colleagues, they would all say, oh yeah, that's really interesting, Ruth, but I haven't got time for that. So yeah, sorry, I'm not trying to be a downer at all. I'm really, really engaged with this, and I think it's certainly the way forward. But I'm, practical.
Well, that's part of the power of FOSIL, really, that you don't. In Chattanooga, when we did it as a group. We had a whole group of librarians, and it was a group effort, and we did it together. And I think the same thing is going to give us the possibility of trying things out in our individual schools, but not having to come up with everything on our own. And, you know, I just want to make one more comment that when I first entered teaching, I wanted to change the world. Really, I remember saying that was my philosophy. I'm going to change the world. And it took a few years to realize what I really wanted was to change one child at a time. And I think it's the same. I had to get to the same point when I thought about collaboration, because I used to get so frustrated that I didn't have time to collaborate with every teacher in the school, but I also didn't have connection to every teacher in the school. And what I had to get my mind around was being content that I did some really powerful work with a few teachers, and that then carried over. And I needed to be strategic in the way that, for example, pick a skill for sophomore biology, I discovered that our students had no idea how to take notes, none. And the biology teachers weren't teaching them how to do that. So by covering every sophomore biology class and teaching note-taking in context, I hit every sophomore student. And so I didn't teach with the physics teachers, or you know, I tried to be strategic, but I had to get my head around the fact that I'm not going to change the whole world. I'm not going to change every teacher, but I can develop individual efforts that then can spread. That's how I felt better about it anyway.
I must admit, in my training courses that I run, people tend to get frightened. They like, how am I supposed to do all of this?
Yeah.
And I do reiterate often that actually you just need to be aware of it all. You need to be aware of it so that you have, when the opportunity arises, you've got it in your bag. You know that it's there. You can pull it out. But actually, it's doing one really important task with a teacher or a group of students is enough, as long as you know where it sits within what it is that you're doing. And I think school librarianship, we very often get to the stage where we are so desperate to work with anybody that you become a yes person. Can you do this? Yes. Can you do this? Yes. And it's like, for me, having tools that focused me, allowed me to go, actually, no, I'm not going to teach website evaluation to your 6-year-olds, because actually they haven't got that skill set yet. They need to do X, Y, and Z before they can get to that stage. And actually having the confidence about my own ability, my own expertise. And I think that is a big point, is that school librarians don't see themselves as teachers. Teachers they see as experts. They don't see themselves, and this has come from something Jenny said on the forum, and it's really rung true with me, is that actually we have to be aware of our own expertise and what we can bring to the curriculum. But not all librarians, school librarians, feel that way. They feel inferior, and actually it's that moving forward, isn't it, with something that you know you can offer, that brings you in line with the people that you're talking to, rather than they're the teachers and I'm just the librarian. And I think that's a bit of a mountain to climb, but one step at a time is probably the way to go. Go on, Daryl.
I think also something that's really important to stress at this point is that, because we spoke about two paradigm shifts, and the first paradigm shift was a paradigm shift to inquiry. And I think something that Ruth mentioned a little bit earlier, which I don't think we can lose sight of, is that the prevailing educational paradigm is an instructional approach. So teachers teach stuff. As a consequence, there is no room for skills. or information literacy skills, or media and information literacy skills in the language of IFLA. So I think the real insight, I think, of the IFLA School Library Guidelines is that we need to develop media and information literacy skills within an inquiry-based approach to teaching and learning. Now, so that's important because that is the difference, say, for example, between A levels and the IB diploma, for example, or GCSEs and the IB MYP. So in theory, IB MYP and IBDP are an inquiry-based approach to teaching and learning. In the MYP, the personal project, in the DP, the extended essay is the outworking of that approach to teaching and learning. Whereas the EPQ is a bolt-on that in some way is at odds to the way that teaching and learning occurs in the classroom for GCSE and A-level. So I think the paradigm shift that needs to take place at a higher level is that we actually need to shift to an inquiry-based approach to teaching and learning that requires the teaching and the use of media and information literacy skills to learn content. And I think that the challenge then for librarians is that the paradigm shift for us is from skills, so from those skills to content area learning. So we then are partners with teachers in approaching the teaching and learning of that content in a different way. Now, the problem there is that there are many librarians, I think, in this country who are struggling with a step up to media and information literacy skills. It then requires another step for our primary concern to be with children learning subject content through inquiry, and our specialism is that process of learning content through inquiry. And then, of course, the next paradigm shift is that that is taking place in a predominantly digital environment. But I don't think we have a deep enough understanding yet of the fact that inquiry is a different approach. It's a fundamentally different approach to teaching and learning. And that it's only when that shift takes place that there then is an actual need for the media and information literacy skills. And it's that we haven't been taught. We haven't been taught how to become partners in teaching and learning subject content. Sorry, Ruth.
Sorry, Daryl, can I ask, do you see, you made a really interesting point, which I think we certainly feel, or I certainly feel in our school, that the EE is supposed to be the outcome of inquiry-based teaching and learning. It isn't in our school, and that's for a number of reasons. That's partly because we teach in the years that build up to the EE. So our students write their EE in year 12. Does everybody know what the extended essay is? A 4,000 word piece of research where the focus is on the process of carrying out the research rather than the content of what you write. Our students, I feel, are very ill prepared for that, because preceding that we do GCSEs where they are just given the textbook at the beginning of 2 years and then they recite it 2 years later effectively. And before that, although we have the 3-year middle years program in place, which should be inquiry based, we're not there yet. We're still trying to teach the UK curriculum, you know, as we would be leading up to GCSEs, because we are leading up to GCSEs. What the end outcome of this long-winded explanation, Daryl, is, do you see a difference in your A-level students writing EPQs and how they are prepared for those through your lower school, and the students writing extended essays?
So I think there are two aspects to that. I think the first one is I joined Oakham School in 2008, and we'd been offering the IB diploma program alongside A-level since 2001. And it became apparent to me really quickly that you could probably count on one hand, maybe two at a push, which teachers were IB teachers. So which teachers were teaching the IB diploma program from the perspective of inquiry as a stance and a process, as opposed to teaching diploma students the way that they taught A-level students. So that is what I mean. We had an opportunity to observe very closely two completely different paradigms. Now, I think the thing that is really interesting for us is that I stumbled into a framework of the inquiry process with an underlying framework of inquiry learning skills. So the Empire State Information Fluency Continuum that was based on Barbara's work, I stumbled into that thinking that it was an information literacy framework. So in terms of that model of the inquiry process, that is largely skills from the investigate stage. So some parts of the investigate stage, some construct, but not much, I think, and largely the express stage. So I found myself having to come to terms with what the inquiry process was and how that changed the way that we taught. So the interesting thing for us is we ended up, after many years, developing FOSIL and FOSIL finding fertile soil in various places in the school, with the school making the decision to do the 3-year MYP. And even so, I still don't think that the school fully appreciated the paradigm shift that doing the 3-year MYP properly requires. So I think we are in this traumatic paradigm shift. But encouragingly, I think, both in terms of colleagues who we are working with, as well as students who we are working with, I think we have evidence, so we have actual evidence that as we get better at what we're doing lower down, that more of what we are doing, both in terms of this approach, but also the skills that enable that approach, more of that is surviving through GCSE and into the upper school, and then they've got a choice between diploma and A-level. The really interesting thing there is that I think many of those skills that we've managed to do really well in year 7, 8, and 9, they carry over into the upper school. But the opportunities that we have in the extended essay, because that is the outworking of the diploma program rather than something to add on, the opportunities that we have then to take what has survived and to lift that onto another level is extraordinary.
And it is worth mentioning that probably 2/3 of our diploma program students are new to the school.
Yeah.
Because we get a lot of people coming in from Germany, particularly Germany, to do the diploma program. So we are starting again in year 12 because we have a lot of new students at that stage.
Yeah, so that kind of remedial approach where you are bringing students who are new up to speed, both an inquiry stance and process, as well as the foundational skills, while also consolidating that for ones who have come up through school, is really important. But I think there is clearly a difference.
Can I just come in on Ruth's point about time? Because I think that's a really, really important one. I think the other thing that the other shift that we have to make is that quite often librarians and teachers see themselves as two separate people doing two separate jobs, two separate groups doing two separate jobs. And I think there is sometimes, and has been in the past, a temptation as a librarian to come in and say, well, look, I'll provide the books that you need, I'll find all your resources, if you'll give me half an hour, 10 minutes, whatever it is, to teach some skills. And there's a sort of transactional, I'll do this for you if you do this for me, as opposed to coming together as educators, both wanting to get the children to the same point at the end. And if we are regarding ourselves as together doing the same job, rather than two separate groups of people doing two separate jobs of needing to fight for the time, it makes quite a big difference. And it also means that there isn't a sense of perhaps anxiety about the teacher taking over my job. So one of the teachers I work with, have done a lot of work with, is on our teaching and learning team. And because we've worked together a lot, he's picked up a lot of inquiry ideas from me, and has become really quite an expert in his own right. And then he will, within the teaching and learning team, in our teach meets, he is quite happy to push those ideas. He is quite, a lot of the stuff, last year I went in and did some work on crap testing with his politics students. This year I don't need to go in and do that because he can do it, which frees me up to do it with somebody else. And he's taken that out with some of the geography department. He's worked with them on some resources. There are other teachers within the school where we work with them on an inquiry, and then they feel they can build the next inquiry themselves. And actually a part of what we do to free up time is to cascade stuff out and train the teachers so that they can do some of the stuff without us, which gives us time to work with other staff. And
crucially, he is an A-level teacher. He's not a diploma teacher.
It's interesting, isn't it, that the more, I think one of the things that Ruth said about time is the fact that we have everything else to do with just the fundamental running of the library. So ordering the stock, shelving the books, issuing the books, all of that. And it's finding the fact that most school librarians work term time only, and not on a teaching timetable in the same way that teachers are. And I think that fundamentally makes a difference. But I am beginning to understand that actually if school librarians begin to understand their role a bit more, there are more opportunities for conversations to be had with senior management about their role. And actually it's librarians understanding their role before you can discuss the fact that you haven't got enough time, that actually this is the role that a school librarian could and should be doing. And actually, you know, what you've got is you've got a library assistant who is issuing the books. And not that that's not important, but actually there's a higher level that we could be working at. And I think that's where the change comes. I've just written a blog about the fact that school librarians, when they're advertised, they're advertised at really low wages, term time only. And actually the conversation had with the school prior to even applying, from a school librarian saying, actually what you're asking for is someone to issue your books. Do you really want that? This is what I could offer if you're willing to pay for a qualified school librarian on a teaching salary. I would wonder whether how many A would be brave enough to do that, but B are willing to, are sure enough of their own expertise to be able to do that. But it's those kind of conversations that actually are willing to, are going to make that kind of fundamental change. A lot of us, you know, many of us just moan about the poor salary that's been offered and do nothing else about it. So we're almost providing the opportunity for schools to employ admin assistants to look after their libraries, as opposed to what they think they're employing as school librarians. Just another thing to think about.
Hand on heart honest, I work a lot of unpaid overtime, essentially because we have a passion about what we do, which doesn't make it right. But in working that overtime and proving what we can do, it provides opportunities to step up and say, you know what, look, this is what your library could be. Now you need to do something about it. And yeah, sometimes you have to make gaps, make opportunities, and sometimes they're not there, but sometimes you have to really push.
I would absolutely agree about working unpaid overtime, and I partly feel that is what makes me on a more of a level with the teaching staff, because they are also working unpaid overtime, but they think I've got the kind of job where I come in at 9:30 in the morning and I leave at 4:30 in the 2:30 in the afternoon, and you know, and how lovely for me that I don't have to work in the holidays. I'm itching to work in the holidays because that's the time when I could do all the work that would prepare me for the term time. You know, so while I'm very happy to work that unpaid overtime, because I always, you know, that's just how I've approached my professional life, I would like that to be recognised. But my essential problem, Elizabeth, is not having that conversation. It's the school turning around and saying, you do realise that you're funded out of effectively our PTA. You are being paid what we can pay you. We've got you to do that job. If we can get more out of you, then I'm afraid we'll do that, because there isn't any more money. You know, we're scraping around for the teaching staff that we need. However worthy we think your job is, or however capable we think you would be of doing it, that's the money there is in the pot. So you take your choice. And I would rather be in the school doing the job and being paid to be the administrative assistant who checks out the books than I would be not doing it. So it's a real catch-22 for that, I think, even if you're brave enough to stand up and have that conversation. But I do feel we've gone miles off Barbara's point.
Can I just quick, I'm very sorry, I've got to go now. I've had a really interesting time coming along. It was great to meet everybody, and I'll definitely be looking more at the FOSIL framework in the future. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Charlie.
Sorry I have to go, but it's Sunday.
Thanks, Charlie. Thanks.
Okay, cheerio. Bye-bye.
Bye.
I started to say in response to use of your own time that my whole career is based on that. And that one of the things that I discovered was that I used that extra time, the time I was willing to donate for very professional activities that took me beyond even my particular school. And so that's how I got involved in my professional association, how I created the first continuum that I ever created. It was done on my own time, but then I had a product that I could bring back to the school. I could bring back to the principal, and they went, oh, okay. And I didn't have to say, and I did this during the summer when I wasn't paid, because it was something that they could actually get their minds around, and they then had a different picture of who I was. And so gradually, I think it had an impact on the way I was perceived. So I always felt good. Okay, I'm donating this time and I choose to do it, and I'm doing whatever I want to do. And then that's how I drove my own professional learning. And actually it was nice. It made me feel good. But I always wrapped it in some kind of a product. It wasn't just make work or thinking. I think when I write, and so I would write professional articles or create things, create documents or something, so that drove my thinking, but I also had something to show at the end. So we haven't heard from Bridget or Lucy or Paula. Have we heard from you?
Hi, Paula.
What do y'all think?
Paula, you're on mute.
Hello. Sorry,
Hi.
yeah, sorry. I come from a state school, which is non-selective. So the curriculum is the thing that the teachers focus on, as well as sport, right? So the library is often overlooked. The only reason it gets praised is because of the size of it, because the amount of books we have in it, because we have 25 computers in it. But English tends to be the only people who use it, and other subjects use it for just using it as a computer place. And it's really hard work getting teachers to work with you, especially when they've got their schemes of work all worked out and they're very focused on getting the curriculum across. So I've heard what you're saying and I find it very inspiring, and I'm going to try and drip feed some of this through to them. But I'd be interested to know how many state schools or non-selective state schools are represented here today, to see that.
Interestingly, in the FOSIL group, the number of state schools is steadily outstripping independent schools.
Oh, brilliant.
Yeah.
Good. Yeah.
Yeah.
Actually, what was interesting, Barbara, I thought that you said was about working together as a group to produce something that we together could take. And actually, I've had a few librarians talking to me recently about taking and using FOSIL resources to create something, and they all need support. It's not something that people who are working on their own can easily do. And I wonder whether it's something that we then extend from this group to go, okay, I don't know what the idea is, but we'll put together as a group an example lesson for, you know, would something like that work for people, do you think? What do you reckon, Paula?
Yeah, I mean, I live in Shropshire, and the nearest people are to me are, oh gosh, about 10 miles away, and then it's 60 miles away. It's a big county, so we can't get together as a small group, you know, and meet up.
But we
like
could get
this,
together online, yes.
yeah, like this, it'd be doable, but it's dependent on whether other school librarians want to give the time to do this, because in lesson time, in school time, they're always up to their eyes with issuing or cataloguing books, and they're not given the opportunity to, because most of us haven't got library assistants. I mean, about 5 years ago I did have, but when my library assistant had to leave for personal reasons, they decided not to replace her. And, you know, we're stuffed without a library assistant. We haven't got the time to meet up with other librarians and discuss things like this, except for in our own time. So,
but if there was a meeting once a month, say, that was a very practical meeting,
I'd be for it, and I'd recommend it to the other librarians that I know in Shropshire, definitely.
Well, maybe we need to think about something that's like that with a small group, so that it doesn't get out of hand.
Yeah.
It might be useful to choose a particular point in the year, you know, the transition points coming into year 7, and say, okay, well, you know, at this point now in the year, we could have a look at that. What could we do with our new joiners in secondary schools? What could we suggest as an introduction, instead of doing a introduction to the library lesson? You know, what could FOSIL give as a demo lesson that would be useful or a good example for people?
Right. Bridget, do you want to join in? Think about
yeah, I was just going to reiterate that really. I work in an independent school, and we do a programme of information skills in the senior school, but we're considering how we can introduce more of an inquiry focus, and it's thinking what we can do just slightly differently to change the focus, and it's actually the practical suggestions. And I'm mainly in the primary school at the moment, and we did have information skills lessons, but the schools decided to focus on reading much more. So now we're trying to sort of occasionally have some sort of inquiry. And again, it's really interesting, the ideas. This has sort of given me encouragement to go back to the teachers that, you know, try and encourage them to encourage the children to do inquiry and hopefully help them with that.
But let me just interrupt a little bit, because I love what you're saying. You know, I was an elementary librarian for only a year, and a K-12 librarian, but what I've figured out through my work on deep reading is the amount of inquiry skills that you can teach when you're reading a story. And so think about it in that context, because when you teach kids to look at the cover of a book and predict what the book is about, that's an inquiry skill. And all you have to do is be explicit to the teachers and to the kids, you're learning how to inquire. And let the teachers know that even though you're doing it on this one story, when they get ready to do a whole inquiry thing, you will have taught how to find the main idea, how to understand different points of view from different characters, how to predict based on visual evidence, how to read illustrations. There are so many things that you can do that really are inquiry in the context of reading stories. So don't get discouraged. You've got a great beginning, and it's really exciting because you're already in the middle of it. And now all you have to do is be explicit that you're teaching inquiry skills. It's not just reading a story and then not reacting. You're asking kids to do things like say, well, how does this story make you feel? Well, that's a part of inquiry. So
thank you, that's very encouraging.
Oh, sweet.
And actually it's possible to broaden that out even further, because I think one of the things that Barbara and I've been discussing quite a bit is when you really begin to understand inquiry as a stance. So it's an attitude of wonder and puzzlement about the world. Then anything, so if you've adopted that stance, then anything is an opportunity to nurture that and to encourage people to act on that. So as soon as it moves from that attitude to doing something about it, that is setting in motion a process. And yeah, you know, a focus on reading, one of the conversations in the forum is about the role of reading in inquiry. And I think something that I've certainly come to appreciate is the extent to which inquiry, which is aimed at building knowledge and understanding of the world, is dependent on reading. And that's not just nonfiction. So insights into the world and how the world works and how I fit into the world through fiction is very important. So I think really what we're talking about is us developing an attitude, a really opportunistic approach to whatever opportunities present themselves to bring about an inquiry stance and process.
And being really nosy, because if somebody comes into the library with a group of kids on the computers and all they want is the computers, I tend to be quite nosy and go over and ask them what they're doing and have a look over the kids' shoulders and see what they're doing. And quite often there's something you can suggest in there of, well, you know, we could help you with that. We could make this even better. You get a long way by being nosy.
I just realised that Sam and Helen haven't had a chance to talk. Does Helen want? Do you want to say something?
Yeah, I mean, I think just to introduce myself, my name's Helen and I'm at Merchant Taylors in Crosby, so another independent school, but my line manager is John Andrews, who was at Oakham. And so I sort of heard about FOSIL right from the start as a school librarian, and I came in after 6 years in an academic library, so I didn't come in with that kind of school librarians do reading, and I was very clear at interview that that's not what I wanted to do, and I think it probably helped me get the job, because I'm in a place where the school does want something different, and I'm still figuring out what that looks like. But I think what's been really useful about doing just this is I've deepened my understanding of FOSIL, and I do get it a little bit more than I did. And it's still a journey, but I think the continual emphasis throughout that it's a journey and it's about doing little things, and that's okay. And I've been able to see that. So I've been at the school 18 months, and a year of that has been a pandemic. So it's, I'd be kind to myself on that front. But my first year, the year 7 physics teacher came in, and they just wanted to use the books in the library for a project they were doing on space. And I said that first time, oh, can I just have 5 minutes to just talk about kind of finding information and evaluating information? And that was great. And then this year, the teacher approached me and said, oh, can you do something on research skills for when they come into the library again? And so I was like, oh, great, you know, we've made a little bit of progress. And then January happened and I was at home. And I was like, well, I'm not going to just not do that this year. So I emailed the teacher and said, I know we're not in school and not in the library, but do you still want this? And they did. And so I delivered it remotely. And it was difficult because I was partially furloughed. So I only had a day a week to work. So it wasn't quite perhaps what I wanted, but you know, I've made progress from that first year where all I did was get the books out to the second year where I've done bit of information skills, and now I know a little bit more, and it would be a perfect like mini inquiry. So kind of the next stage I want to maybe might not be next January, it might be the January after that, and I'm working with them to do a little mini inquiry, and for you know, and that's okay, and just start small, and then other teachers kind of hear what you're doing, and you just slowly get to where you want to be. And yeah,
and if I could pick up on Helen's point, because John, so John himself, so he was appointed Director of Teaching and Learning at Oakham School, and John himself was on a journey, and it was really only just before he left, I think, that he genuinely began to understand what it was that we were doing and why it was that it mattered. But he quite clearly has carried that with him, because is he academic deputy head?
Yeah.
So he has carried that with him, and that is a seed that has been planted somewhere else that you are now nurturing into life. The other interesting thing was John's line manager, the academic deputy head at Oakham, he went on to become headmaster at AKS Lytham. And probably about a month ago, David contacted me to ask me if I would do a presentation to his senior leadership team on what maximum FOSIL in a school might look like. So that is seed that has been sown. And I think the other thing that we mustn't lose sight of, Barbara mentioned, you know, making a difference in the life of one child. That science teacher who you did that little thing for, that is a seed, and who knows what fruit that will bear, whether at your school or another school. And I think we need to understand that it is pretty difficult, it is pretty tough, but I genuinely believe that what we're doing is really important and urgently necessary. And we may not see the progress that we're making immediately, but we need to encourage each other to persevere, because that will bring about, I think it will bring about a deep and a lasting change.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay, Sam, you're the only person that hasn't managed to have a word. Can I just get you in?
Yeah, sorry, I just unmute there. Oops. Okay, can you hear me? So I did something to my screen. That's okay. So I'm librarian and careers leader in a girls' independent school in South London. So again, time is a big issue for me. We also do accelerated reader with year 7 and 8, which I administrate, obviously, being the librarian. So really the only kind of research things I've been able to get involved in so far, this is only my 4th year there, and part of that's been in the pandemic, obviously, as well. The only things I've been able to get involved in research-wise is a bit of EPQ kind of helping them with research and referencing, that kind of stuff. And I really would like to get it in a lot earlier. But again, for me, that would be confidence in teaching some of the skills, which I know I must have. I did a master's only about 10, 12 years ago at City. And they actually did do some kind of information literacy kind of stuff there, but not as a teaching it to children kind of way. It was for us looking at the research process. So I need to look at the FOSIL website, I think, and work out where I am on that, and then how I can kind of pass that on. If we could do some kind of group sample lesson, you know, to kind of share, that would be really helpful for me to see where I can go from there as well with teaching people. And I know what you mean about also trying to drip feed with the teachers. My previous school, I was we were getting there with some bits and pieces. Then a different opportunity came up, so I moved for various reasons. And it feels like I've had to start again with building up those relationships with the staff, and it does take an awfully long time to get in there with people, especially when the staff change quite regularly as well.
Yes. Yeah, well, certainly, you know, I think there's lots of examples of lessons up on
FOSIL.
inquiry journals on FOSIL, on the FOSIL Group website. But what I think we probably need to do is maybe a group that talks through what that looks like in your own setting. May be helpful to try and encourage you to then take it forward. So yeah, lovely. I'd love to do that. I've just noticed that because I can't see Lucy, we've not included her. Lucy, if you're there and you want to talk, do you want to just, there she is. Hi, Lucy. You're on mute still.
Sorry, I'm here and I'm hiding really. I mean, many of you probably know, I work with Daryl and Jenny anyway. So anything I wouldn't have much to say that they probably wouldn't have said had they wanted to, had the opportunity come up. But I mean, going back to the comments about that Barbara made about stories and reading, and thinking about that, we have had for the last a good number of years, one of our big inquiries that we plan is based on a book that all of our year 7s read in the summer before they come into year 7. So they're given a book as a kind of welcome, read this over the summer, you will be working on it. They all get the same book, and the English department then use that book as the basis of the whole winter term. So you're looking at 12-13 weeks of work based on Marcus Sedgwick's Floodland. And the whole culmination of that is an inquiry that we have planned with them, that we actually we co-teach, Jenny and I co-teach with them about science fiction or futuristic dystopian writing. And that all actually kind of stems from one novel that they will have a shared reading experience of. And that works really well, and the English department are very keen always to continue with that. So I think using kind of some fiction, whether it be a story or a short novel, as a way to then introduce them to the FOSIL cycle, to the whole idea of inquiry, is a really good way in, because obviously reading literacy is always going to be a big focus in a school. So to use that as your starting point and to go from there. We used to, for many years, we used a novel with our year 7s going into year 8s, which we haven't done for the last couple of years. But then they would work on that novel again in English, and we used that almost as the basis for our library induction. So most of these pupils aren't new to school, but as an introduction to year 8, it was a kind of, no, okay, these are all the things that you need to be thinking about in terms of, this was focusing on the non-fiction elements, the informational elements within the novel that they had read, and using that to remind them about library resources, to remind them about how they would go about finding information, how they would then use that information to do something going on. This, obviously, we would only have probably 2 50-minute lessons to do all of this, but the novel, they'd all read the novel, so we didn't have to worry about that. We could just use what they knew about it to then cover a whole range of other things in 2 50-minute lessons. That's something we're going to have to fight back for, I think, next academic year. Yes, Barbara?
I'm reminded of one thing that really worked in my school. The English teachers required students to read a YA novel of their choice. So they all read different ones. And we developed an interesting unit on, they were all problem novels, you know, teenage angst, everyone without fail. And so we combined it with the idea, then the students researched the problem. What are the real issues behind teen suicide or whatever it was? And then they had to write an advice column, question and response based on their research. And so it was a great way to capitalize on what the English teachers were already doing based on literature, but then to pull kids into research that they really cared about, because they were issues that they cared about, and then gave them a product where they could be the expert on the stage with their advice column. And so I totally agree with you, Lucy, that that's a great way in. And in fact, for older students, I don't know if any of you all have used picture books as an introduction to an issue like civil rights or something, and there are great picture books. And so when you're wanting to help students get an overview of the whole concept, the idea of civil rights or whatever else, often there's a picture book that you can share and talk about the underlying concept, which is a great way to give kids an overview, not something a classroom teacher would think about, but they are very appreciative then that kids have had that introductory contextual conversation.
Fascinating. Right, I've just noticed the time. It's 3:30 on a Sunday.
Well, for some of us.
For some of us, yes. What time are you there, Barbara?
10:30.
10:30. In the evening?
No, morning.
Morning. Oh, you've got plenty of time.
Yeah, but now I have to go to sleep. I had to get up too early.
So unless there's any more burning questions before we go, I just want to say thank you so much for your time, Barbara. It's been eye-opening, it's been thoughtful, it's been certainly pushed me to think beyond what it is that I'm currently doing, and why and how we do it, I think is something that has been brought out of the discussion today. The fact that we've got people here sat here saying that they actually want to work together to produce something, wow, we've achieved something that I didn't even expect that we were going to achieve. So it just demonstrates how pulling people together can make such a huge difference, and I'm absolutely eternally grateful that you were willing to give up your time today for us to do that. Thank you all, the rest of you, very much for joining us. Continue, I'll let Dorothy speak in a minute. Thank you very much for joining us and for giving up your time. Please continue to talk on the forum. What I will probably do is email you via the Zoom email that I got to set this up, to offer an opportunity to maybe do some collaborative work together. And the final word must go to Daryl.
Well, just to say thank you to Elizabeth for doing the administrative side of this, and for Barbara for joining us, and for you and to you. Just that thing that I ended with, the revolution will not be televised. I do not for a second believe that the paradigm shift at a policy level will happen, which means that it is going to be down to us. Tough as it is, it's going to be down to us to bring about change where we can, for the children who we teach. So they deserve more, I think, than the system will ever provide. And that's why I think it's so important that we've come together today. We've spent time together today, sharing ideas, encouraging each other, the whole reason why we created the FOSIL Group website in the first place was because it was such a long, difficult journey for me on my own, figuring it out, and then met somebody, and then met somebody, and met somebody, and met somebody, and met somebody. So the whole point of the FOSIL Group is to pool our knowledge and our experience, but also the practical outworking of that, to pool that so that we can do what we need to do more effectively if we find ourselves in situations where we are on our own. So the whole point is we're not on our own, but we need to find ways to leverage that to greater effect. So yeah, I'm looking forward to opportunities. We'll move forward purposefully with that, opportunities to meet and to talk and to encourage each other in practical ways.
Perfect.
Yes.
Lovely. Well, thank you very
Very
much for
good.
your afternoons, and we'll see you on the forum. Thank you very much. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.